Today, on the Terrible Warriors, we meet the makers. Craig Campbell from Nerdburger Games is someone who loves the storytelling of tabletop games. When the pandemic upended all of our gaming groups and abilities to connect to each other, many of us retreated to our own solo interests. If you are fortunate enough to have a good internet connection and a quiet environment, perhaps you were able to connect with a virtual gaming group. But if you didn't, what did you do to satiate your gaming and storytelling appetite? Enter The Secrets of the Vibrant Isle. This is a solo RPG that Craig calls cozy gaming. Grab a blanket, your favorite snack, and a comfortable place to sit and relax as you journey to a mystical island and explore and meet its denizens, and at the end of your journey, find out if you'll be accepted to remain. Secrets of the Vibrant Isle is currently in the final week of its Kickstarter campaign, and you can visit the page right now by clicking the link in our show notes or episode description. But before we talk more about the Vibrant Isle and its secrets, this is Meet the Makers, so let's get to know Craig. And as I always like to start, I started by asking him what it was about tabletop that first attracted him to this style of gaming.
Well, it's one of those things that I didn't know it was missing from my life until I discovered it. I went through younger days, grade school, junior high, high school and everything. And I didn't write or write stories or anything like that. There was no drama club at my school. I went to a small high school. The drama club restarted the year after I graduated. And I think I might have, tried that and maybe found it, that sort of thing, a little bit earlier, like portraying a character and being part of telling a story. I've always enjoyed movies. I read a lot as a kid. And so when my friend Brian introduced me to second edition D&D in 1991, and we played one game session before I went home for the summer that year, it just like everything, it kind of clicked, it was just like one of those things like, oh, this is really neat. I really like this. This is cool. I bought the books, absorbed them over the summer, didn't get a chance to play. And then that next fall got together with Brian and some other folks. And we just played, D&D like crazy. We got into the Star Wars West End game, played a little Shadowrun, various things. And it just kind of ballooned from there. And then that turned into, I've taken stabs at writing short story stuff, poetry, screenplays, and then, eventually designing games of my own, in addition to having freelanced for a bunch of different games and companies over the years as well. It was just something that I kind of that. The creative pursuit of being part of telling a story has just, once I discovered it, it was like, okay, now it's something that I do in some way, shape or form, for the rest of my life.
So that brings us up to today, talking about Secrets of the Vibrant Isle. And it's already in Kickstarter. It's been out now for about 3 weeks at the time we're talking, and we're getting up to the final leg on this. But tell me about this game, and it's a solo RPG as well, which is really fascinating to me, and I'd love to peel that onion apart and learn more about that design process. But introduce me to this island that we're going to be exploring.
Yeah, in the game, the assumption is that your character that you're portraying has sought out the Vibrant Isle. They've heard the story, they've heard the legend of this kind of mysterious island where all of these strange and wondrous things live, and they went looking for it and they find it, and you shipwreck on the island. And the island is kind of magical and mysterious, and it doesn't let just anybody find it, and it doesn't let just anybody stay. So in the game, you have 4 weeks of game time to essentially prove to the island and its inhabitants that you are worthy of remaining. So the gameplay is kind of built around the idea of exploring the island, scavenging the shipwreck, improving your character, meeting the inhabitants, and just sort of slowly building resources and capabilities and everything that will allow you to succeed at a finale scenario. And there's several of them that you can choose from. That is going to be the ultimate test of whether you get to stay or not. So it's, the game is part traditional kind of RPG, kind of rules light RPG. It's part sort of choose your own adventure, because you'll be making choices that'll take you in different directions. There's a certain amount of randomness to it as well, because you go to explore the island and like you never know what you're going to find, and the island kind of keeps its secrets hidden, so you can't always find your way back to the same places, so which forces you to sort of kind of explore other things. And then it's, it can also be part journaling and mapping game. If that's the sort of thing you want to incorporate, you could kind of build a whole story for this character that you're playing and play like a longer version of the game that takes more time. But you otherwise played entirely by yourself. And the book basically takes on the role of the GM. Like, rather than having a person who's telling you, this is what you encounter, this is the thing that happens, and this is the sort of challenge you need to overcome, there are encounters and different, other things that you do in there that the book kind of describes for you.
Yeah, because I did want to talk about that experience part as well. It's funny when we're talking about other indie games that I've interviewed on Terrible Warriors, it usually comes around to, if you're going to buy an indie game, you're probably going to run that game, especially with a gaming group that is already playing something else. It's unlikely you're going to convince your resident GM to be like, play this game that I bought. And I'm like, no, you run it. It's your game. But this is when you've got a weekend to yourself, or you got an evening on your own, or a lunch break, and there's no gaming group. It's yourself. So that I really want to ask about that experience, as well as I've had a chance to play GM-less games. And even in a GM-less game, it tends to that role of the GM is shared and it moves around the table. Right. So whoever is currently in the spotlight with their character, the other players step into that GM narrative role. So in this case, you've said the GM is kind of taken in the role in that book, and I guess you're using the book to reference as you're playing to help guide you through this. What is that like? Is it a silent experience, like a meditation, or does it? How have you? Because this is have you had a chance to see other people play the game? Because it seems like a wonderful, cozy, but also very solitary experience.
Well, I haven't taken the time to sit and watch somebody play the game, because that would also kind of require them to like vocalize what they were doing.
Well,
otherwise,
because it's intimate. It's almost an invasion of privacy.
Just kind of read and ponder. But yeah, I mean, it is it's a solitary game. It's kind of intended to be something that you can lose yourself in. I don't expect that you would necessarily, vocalize a lot as you're playing, unless you're the type of person, like some people might like narrate things out loud and kind of present, you could read it out loud. Like there's nothing wrong with I did a video, and we've had other people that did like APs of the game so you just read the book out loud, so that there's a vocal element, because you're doing,
you're presenting it now,
basically performing it for other people. Yeah. But you may do that yourself as you're playing, or you may sit quietly in a corner, or like on a bus or at the airport or whatever it is, and just kind of tool your way through the adventures on the island. The idea being that, like you said, like cozy gaming, I describe it that way. That's something that's kind of popped up with video gaming. There's a little bit of that kind of being referenced in some RPGs out there, where it's like I imagine some people anyway, like curling up in a comfy chair or on the sofa with a snack and a hot beverage for an hour or two, rather than watching a movie. Yeah,
it's got that Stardew Valley kind of feel, that like it's got you're describing it as, you're finding supplies and you're exploring, you're meeting these other characters, and certainly I've got a number of video games like that, where it's exactly that. Grab a blanket, sit on the couch, and just, tonight I'm going to have a nice quiet time with no explosions. And
exactly.
This sounds like, for me, like my history playing with tabletop is been a history of standing around tables yelling emphatically with hands. You got the Muppets there behind you on our Zoom call, so we're all just doing Kermit arms all the time. And this is much more introspective when you're playing this game, because there is no friends at the table to make jokes at, to get reactions from. It's you that you're playing with. And is that the kind of, because I've seen a big rise in solo gaming, either as just one-page RPGs or games like this, or even the I was mentioning before we talked, the One Ring that got kickstarted, the Lord of the Rings RPG. They've got a Strider mode, so you can have a solo. So I've been seeing solo gaming with tabletop becoming much more common all the time. As someone now who's making a solo game and has it on Kickstarter, just putting it on the line, what is it about this style of tabletop that attracted you so much that you wanted to design a game for it?
Well, I think from what I've seen, solo gaming of different sorts has, like you said, kind of been on the rise. I mean, I think there's been things like, games like this for quite a long time. I mean, you could argue that choose your own adventure books are solo games. I think that there are certain parts of the world, my understanding, like that in the East Asia and like South Korea, Japan, I've been told that their solo game has kind of gained a popularity. It's become a little more prevalent. It's, and as it is, in any kind of international kind of thing, like it's going to cross borders, right? It's going to come across the ocean or around the world from places where it's kind of more popular. And eventually everybody kind of discovers things because of the internet. And certainly this past year and a half, 2 years has been like, well, what do I do like for my gaming fix?
I have no friends. I can't go anywhere. What am I, I used to run a game at a restaurant every weekend. That's obviously not happening. I have a shoddy internet connection. So even if my friends and I could get online to play something, it's hard to do because I can't count on my internet holding up. I don't have a microphone and a webcam or whatever. It brought our podcast to a complete halt because we used to record here in my apartment. And when we tried to do virtual setups, no one had microphones or a quiet environment. One of us lives on a boat in a marina. So like, and is just using his phone as a hotspot. So it just wasn't practical. And so we just didn't do anything for a whole year. And it took us that long just to figure it out. And that's not just as a game group, but as someone who's a podcaster. So eventually I was going to have to figure it out. But if you're just gaming, that can be a big problem, especially if you're in a small town and you're used to getting your gaming fix, going to conventions, every month and doing that. It all stopped. It all went away.
Right. And I think even after kind of things get back to more normal, where we have more conventions and people are able to get together in groups and have home games resume in force, I think there's going to be a level of enjoyment, it's a different type of enjoyment, a different type of experience that you can get from various types of solo games, whether they be video games or analog games, tabletop games, that, they will continue to be popular in, with certain types of gamers. There's some people like gaming for them is like, it's more a social activity than it is about the game. Like like being at the table with the friends is kind of the big deal. And like the fact that we're playing a game is kind of secondary. There's people who really love games where it's really kind of built around, you kind of have, like having multiple players, playing multiple characters that serves the game better. That's their thing. But there's going to be people who are just like, I'd like to just kind of have this fun little thing. And I don't have to worry about driving anywhere. I don't have to worry about wrangling a group of people together and trying to find a schedule that works for everyone. If we do this thing online, I don't have to worry about internet connections or whether or not, one of my friends has this dog that never stops barking or has, family and kids that like, there's just going to be distractions all the time that the person might have a hard time doing an online game just because there's people around and it's, like you said, quiet environment. It's hard to, not everybody has access to that for 4 hours. It's hard to do that where
straight. Every time the player who's wearing a headphone starts laughing and then their dog starts barking in response because they don't realize that their owner is playing on a virtual game. Or we actually were recording a game not too long ago and someone on our was like, I have to go. My 2-year-old's throwing poop on the wall.
Yeah,
and it was just like, oh man,
got to deal with that. Game stops.
That's a priority. Whereas, if you're just sitting around and like, I guess I could turn on a streaming service and watch something again, or I guess I could pop in this game again, but then you got this book on the table and you can just flip it open. And you even mentioned in your description, if you can do this in 2 hours or break it up into even just 30 minutes, if that's all you have.
Yep, exactly. And the hope too, is that we're going to make the PDF very navigable. So with bookmarks and hyperlinks in the text, with a form fillable character sheet where you track everything. So if you get a dice roller that'll roll D10s for you, you could put the whole thing on, your laptop or a tablet and take that with you. So like you could, play it in the car while you're a passenger and, while you're waiting for the airport, waiting for the plane at the airport or even on the plane. Like there's like a lot of ways you could take advantage.
Can't play
of this.
games on my phone in the subway, but I could play this because it would work offline. What is the design process when you're making a game here that isn't made for group play? It's made for this one person. So, one of the times, like we're doing Simbroom on the podcast right now, and it was new to me, but it wasn't new to Mitch, and so I got to lean on him to help with the rules. You're by yourself when you're running this, and it's also kind of in a weird way holding yourself accountable in the way that you might push or fudge rules when you're playing with a group, especially if you're running as a GM. I guess I'm just what considerations go into writing a story like a mechanically like this for that's different if you were doing something for a group play game.
Sure. Well, at its core, you've got basically 4 traits that your character uses, and that's all very similar to a lot of games, right? But it still needs to be approachable, right?
Yeah,
like you'll attempt tasks, you'll succeed or fail. But one of the things that I looked at too was like, okay, I just gave some thought in just simple terms. What are some of the things in this game? If this game had a GM, what are some of the things that the GM might adjudicate if you decided, well, I want to do this or I want to do that, and the GM could perhaps adjudicate how to handle that.
There comes a point in any game where it has to be out of your control, or else you're just kind of doing a very consensual improv, but the rules don't matter. And yeah, I guess, so like the game, Monster Hearts put it, the game has to stay feral.
Right.
It needs to stay on the table and not in any one person's control, except now you are one person.
Right. And so, well, like for the purposes of the game, what I found myself thinking was in designing the system was to say, okay, the person, your character goes to the island and they're going to go around and explore stuff, and it can be very random. You're going to be making rolls that determine where you end up when you explore, just randomly. But there, a certain amount of control would be good too. So, for example, one of the things that I looked at was like, well, if I was playing this with a GM, I could tell the GM, I want to explore the dark parts of the island. I want to explore the places where the dangerous stuff is.
And they can follow the bouncing ball.
And the GM could just invent the dangerous stuff or turn to the part of the setting book that said, here's the danger stuff. So what I did in the game was develop basically there's 3 tracks total, but the 2 that are important for what I'm talking about here is there's worry and wonder, where you basically have points that you accrue as you play. And as your worry gets higher and higher, it represents your character like being worried, being concerned, being afraid, like this place is kind of spooky and dangerous and what's going to happen. And then wonder is kind of your character's sense of awe at all the wonderful things that they see, and their kind of fascination with the things in the world. And so you can spend, as if you accrue worry, you can spend it to affect the random roll that you make to decide where you go to explore. And when you spend the worry, it causes your roll to be lower. Every point of worry you spend reduces the roll that you make by 10. And that takes you into the lower number category, which is where the darker and dangerous things live. So you have the ability to say, well, I want to face my fear and alleviate some of this worry. I'm going to spend some points. And in the game, you roll percentile dice to determine what you find when you go to explore. And the low numbers are where the darker and dangerous things live, and the high numbers are where the really wonderful, like lighthearted kind of things live more. So, when you spend worry, like say you roll a 44, you spend 3 points of worry. Well, that now makes it a 14. And a 14 is a very low number on that percentile dice. And so the likelihood that you're going to encounter something kind of a little more sinister is higher. So that worry and wonder expenditure takes over the role of the GM saying, well, I'm going to present this darker thing to you because you're seeking that out.
Yeah, it helps teeter totter between these ebbs and flows in the story. Because I mean, the difference, I was just thinking while you're talking, like the difference mindset, when I'm a player, I'm responding to what's being served to the table. I'm trying to be present with my character and reacting as things are happening more or less in real time. Whereas a GM, while I'm still trying to be present with my players, I'm also anticipating what's happening next, trying to set what's behind door number 2, so that in case they go through there, I've got even sometimes either a solid idea or just a vague idea of where things, the different ways it could branch. And that can be very difficult if you obviously can't be doing that if you're playing by yourself, or you're just going to be splitting your brain in half. So it's really interesting. I was curious about that mechanic side on how the game helps with those ebbs and flows of the story to still feel dramatic and random and a little out of control. Because that's part of the fun of being in a minecart in a game like this and being like, we're off, and I don't always have a say, and or being tied to a comet, but also being able to have a certain degree of control too as the player, to be able to consent to what you are rolling yourself into, so that you're not, if you really don't want to go into that sinister side, that's not the experience you want. It sounds like there's that wiggle room to help massage your
right.
own
to an extent.
experience.
Yeah, you're still at the whim of the dice, but you do have, like, if you're just not ready to deal with any of that of the more dangerous stuff, and you roll like a 26, and you've got a couple of points of wonder, you can always make that into a 36 or a 46 or a 56 and just spend and just be like, I'm going over
just
there.
Turn the dice around. The 10s are now the ones.
Also, they're like one aspect of the game, I kind of developed the idea as like in a dungeon crawl. Like if you're playing it like, and this game kind of feels like a dungeon crawl in that, I open the next door and then I roll some dice and that's what's in the room. Right. Or in this case, that's what's on this part of the island.
Yeah.
And so like in dungeon crawls, there's always like, sometimes you just progress straight through them, right? But sometimes you find yourself being like, oh, I have to go back to this place because there was something that we saw. There was a clue that we didn't know about,
that
or
room.
something
Yeah.
that we failed at there, but we need to go back and try again because I think it might be important. So the island is mystical and magical and doesn't let you remember everything about where things are. So like as you explore, you just make this random roll and that determines where you go. But you can
so you're just dreamily
sort of,
wandering around, a little foggy in terms of exactly the progression on how time is passing.
And the island, maybe it turns you around and points you in different directions. Maybe it literally moves things from one place to another. It's left very vague.
I'm thinking at Demon Souls, where the fog just takes you and then teleports you into a new place.
But then in the game, you also you've got 4 spots, little slots on your character sheet where you can write down the encounter number of something that you went to and you want to go back to. So rather than rolling, you can return
fast travel markers.
You can return to that spot, right?
Cool.
So, like if you go to a particular exploration and you fail at doing the thing that you wanted to do, then you can come back to it later and try it again when you've got more resources and a better chance to succeed.
Okay, rules aside, This is about a story, and this is about a really cool setting. So you're saying all these like mysterious little words of like, it's a cozy game, you're shipwrecked, there's exploration, but also there's dark and sinister elements and wonderful lighthearted elements. What are some of the things, because it's also random, are there like determined, like just a big table of things you can meet and you're rolling for it, or is there a bit of procedural generation where things are going to combine to create original encounters each time? What are some of the things you're going to see when you wash up onto this shore?
There's kind of both. When you go to explore, you roll percentile dice. And if you get doubles, you encounter the inhabitants. And the inhabitants is a series of 5 encounters that you'll keep coming back to. Like the first time you encounter the inhabitants, you just catch a glimpse of them. And maybe, and each time you encounter the inhabitants, you develop something about them. So the inhabitants aren't set in the game. Like you will invent them, you will world build them as you play, and they can be different every time. So there's a list of 10 to roll on, or just pick what, seems most appealing to you at the moment and decide, well, the inhabitants are this big, and this is kind of how these are like mannerisms that they use and how they kind of move and act. And then, each time you encounter, then you add more to that, and it's like a prescribed set of stuff. And by the time you get kind of toward the tail end, you're discovering like their special abilities that they can, things that they can do that are kind of fantastic. And then in the final encounter, you befriend them, and they invite you to visit their community, and one of them becomes a friend.
This feels like where the wild
things are. You put them on your character sheet, and they accompany you on the rest of your adventure. So that's one of those where you're kind of, like you were saying, just kind of in part building it yourself as you go. And then if you don't roll doubles, any of the other 90 numbers takes you to an encounter. And that encounter is usually set up as there's a name for the encounter and a number so that you can remember what it is to go back to. And then there's like a brief setup to what you discover. And then there's some sort of a twist to that kind of sets up what the challenge is, what's wrong here, or what do you have to deal with, or what can you exploit or gain, manipulate or somehow discover or whatever. And then there's something that happens to you, whether it be like, oh, you just gain a willpower because of this, you're at this encounter, or you make a check of some sort. And if you succeed, you gain this. And if you fail, then this happens to you. And they vary. There's all sorts of different variations of things. So, each of those encounters is kind of set in what they are, but there's so many of them that you won't necessarily repeat them that often in a single sitting, single playthrough of the game, unless you want to. You might luck out and happen to roll the same one again. And there's a rule for allowing you to just re-roll if you want to. And then, or you'll during the course of the game, you might go to 30 different encounters, and some you'll succeed and some you'll fail. But then the next time you play the game, you might see some of those again, but this time you'll fail rather than succeed, and vice versa.
Different outcomes.
Or if if time passes between the times that you play the game, you'll just forget some of the encounters.
Sure, you're in a different space too, so your reaction to it's going to be different. There's a GM-less game I really like called The Fall of Magic, and it's played on a scroll. Everything on the scroll, that never changes. There's some pathways you can pick, and you have different prompts that you can choose. I've played it like 6 or 7 times. Every single time, even though it's the same scroll, it's a completely different world, completely different story every single time. Sometimes the descriptions are just vague enough that I'll just be in a different place the next time I'm playing, and it'll be a completely different imagery that'll generate in my mind when I read that same thing.
And the hope here was that there's a good deal of replayability, because you'll play a different type of character with different strengths and weaknesses. You'll go on different encounters. You'll invent the inhabitants differently. You'll improve or not your character. You'll discover different things when you scavenge the shipwreck. You'll choose a different finale to go on to attempt. I mean, there's a lot of different, like you could play this game 20 times and have 20 very different experiences.
So for someone considering this, we talk a lot about trying to help make our games easy to or accessible to play, and one of the things I love to do here on Terrible Warriors is really impart the you can do this feel. Like, I don't want someone to listen to me playing a game on the show and go, well, I'm not clever enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not inventive enough, or witty or funny to be able to pull off playing these games. And so rather I'll just listen to other people play it, or I'll just watch other people play it. And I really want to help empower whoever's listening to us talking like, oh yeah, I can totally do this. So for a solo game, just thinking about myself here, how is it? It sounds really accessible. Is it daunting to pick up a game that you're going to run by yourself, be by yourself? For someone who, like myself, who's only recently getting into meditation, that can be intimidating sometimes, to a little vulnerable to sometimes play a game exploring yourself. And I know some solo games are more intense than others as well in terms of those themes. So what would you say to someone who's just on the fence? Maybe they've only ever been a player and they're not used to being the world builder in the game that they're playing. How open is this book to someone who is dipping their toes into this wonderful kind of storytelling?
I think it's pretty easy to adapt to kind of the way you want to play it and to take it to the level that you want. I kind of refer to the game having two modes, short play and long play. And really short play is like, okay, I've got my character created and I'm going to roll and I'm going to go on these explorations. I'm going to meet the inhabitants, and you play it like an adventure game. Like you're going to, you've got a character sheet that's like, this is where you fill up your equipment and you find your little friends and magics and things that are going to help you. And your goal is ultimately to defeat this boss, which is a finale scenario. You don't necessarily you read the thing, read the exploration, deal with the problem, make the check, gain or lose whatever it is that's going to happen. And you don't necessarily take it to the level of like, now I'm going to kind of immerse myself and think about like, what would my character do in this location and what does this really look like? And you can play the long play version, which is to journal it and really kind of get deeper into role play and thinking about like what the character's experience is in a more complex manner. But like the game itself is like the expectation is 72 pages of a 6x9 book, and six of those
you can
pages.
Just slip this into your shoulder bag, no problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. 6
of those pages is the rules, and then everything else is just stuff that guides you through other things.
So you flip. Now that's the game, and then the rest is reference as you're playing through.
Essentially, there's basically, in order to make this very navigable.
Yeah.
In both book and PDF form, I set it up as like, I want to try to do 2-page spreads for a lot of this, which is to say, okay, character creation is on 2 pages. Everything you need about character creation is on those 2 pages. So when you need to reference character creation, you go there. The basic rules is on those 2 pages. Taking your actions is on those 2 pages. Like when you're exploring the island, you jump to some other page in the book to explore this, encounter number 67. And then you're going to go back to taking your actions, and you just flip back to that spot in the book via a bookmark or a link. And you'll just jump around the PDF, or if you're doing it with the physical book, like you could bookmark, like I said, you could bookmark 3 spots in the book and have access to all 3 immediately.
I have a choose your own adventure.
Where all the real rules are.
You were mentioning choose your own adventure. I have a choose your own adventure up here on To Be and or Not to Be, the Hamlet Choose Your Own Adventure book.
Sure.
Written by Ryan North. It came with a bookmark, though, that was a Yorick skull bookmark with 9 bookmark teeth on the skull. So you could fit all the different pages if you wanted to keep track of all the different choices or places you were going through. And, I mean, that's just part of the joy of playing tabletop sometimes, is just flipping through and finding the different descriptions and the different locations. The Kickstarter has been out throughout October now, as we're rounding the corner to the final band. What has it been like now putting this game out for others to see? I mean, the PDF and that would be available, but I know that there's been some play testing. I know there's a video of you playing the game. How has it been to putting all this work together and having the Kickstarter out? It's been funded now. If you're signing up to it today, you're listening to us talking, you've met your goal. Congratulations. And how has the reaction been? What's that process been like for you, having this game soon to be out in the wild and slowly being released to a few those early access to be able to test and play it?
To be honest, before the first playtest round, it was nerve-wracking because I had no idea how well this was going to play. Like, in fact, me and Shireen Gilchrist is the co-designer. I brought her in. I basically designed the system, and then we kind of built the world with all the encounters and all that stuff. And so we put this whole thing together, and we're like, okay, I think this works. And then we said, okay, let's you and I each play it.
Well, yeah, because
play it through.
No one else is going to be there when they play it. This
see how it works. See if the numbers kind of shake out. If it seems reasonable, and then we'll put it in the hands of playtesters. And we played it a little, and I was like, okay, I think it's okay. But again, but
there's so much bias on your side because this is your own creation.
I haven't played it 20 times. Yeah. I've only played it twice. So put it in the hands of the playtesters, all of whom played at least once. Many played twice. To try different approaches and kind of play as different characters and whatnot. And it was generally very positive feedback. there were some minor tweaks that got made to it. And then we moved toward the Kickstarter, and I put it out to a friend on Twitter who got not only herself, but two of her friends, to all three of them each individually played the game on her stream to kind of, try it out and let people see what it's like. So in addition
and the
to
different versions that this game
it,
can take place at.
It's been generally a positive experience. It was nerve-wracking to start with, because it was like, I've never designed a game like this before. Like, is this going to even be fun? Like, okay, sure, I've got a character and I make my rolls, and like, but but is it actually going
to be an enjoyable experience to actually explore this story?
I think it is, because it's come out of my brain and Shireen's brain. So like the encounters I like we hashed out what those encounters should be, and we outlined stuff up, and like everything that she wrote was kind of, went through approval and development with me too. And so I was like, okay, these are all good. This is all good stuff. I like all this. But until a player actually sits down and, runs through the game over the course of 2 hours and comes back and says, hey, I had a really good time. And this was cool. And this was great. And like, this was a little weird, maybe. And there was a rule that it was hard to know for sure how to do this. So let's clarify that. And, we kind of tightened it up.
So 90 encounters, the inhabitants. I don't want you to spoil too much, because part of playing this game is also the reveal and the exploration and the turn to it. Go, ooh, that's nice. But what would be your favorite? Because obviously there must have been some that didn't make the final cut too, as you're writing all these ideas down. What's one that is near and dear to your heart? What's one of your favorite encounters that it's going to make it into this game?
Oh boy,
that you also would like to share and not. I understand you want to keep some things behind the veil.
I've been sharing kind of like the two same ones, so that I don't, like, over the course of multiple podcasts, like suddenly give away like 12 different encounters. People
can piece it all together, like, aha, I've got the full set.
Like there's one that I wrote that is one of the darker ones, where like you encounter this fell beast, and it's a fight scenario. It's like you've got to make a survive check to fight this thing. But before you even get to do that, you check your willpower, and if you have less than 3 willpower, you just run away.
Yeah,
you don't even hang around. Like, there's something coming at you, you just take off.
Nope, you just run out the other.
And like the rewards that are available to you if you defeat the creature are good. There's like a cool thing that you can gain, but you can't even go in there if you don't have. You can't even try it if you don't have willpower. And not all encounters are like that. Some of them are just straight up make your check. But like there's some that are like there's like you can't get close to this thing unless like you got a certain stat or number of points in something. And then one that Shireen created that I would have never imagined, I would have never come up with, is the cookie jar tree, where there's a tree that's got cookie jars growing out of it, and a creature approaches you and asks you to help bake cookies to fill the cookie jars for the cookie party later. And so you're making a check that's about cooking.
Yeah, it's also got a slight Mad Hatter at the Tea Party feel to it as well. Like, so this does have the Vibrant Isle has a bit of like that Wonderland dreamscape. It can be real and scary, but also at times absurd and strange and otherworldly. So you got cookie jars growing on trees, and so would the cookies be the seeds in the jar being the fruit? Is that how the ecology works here?
I think that's for you to decide when you play the game.
Or is it the chocolate chip the seed, and as we eat it, we're the pollinators from the crumbs that fall as the cookie crumbles.
You'll play the game, you encounter the cookie jar tree, you journal, and I guess you can decide. Like your
character is actually just being like hyper analytic, trying to add scientific reasoning to every wild and fantastical thing they're seeing on this island.
Why not?
When Mr. Spock goes to the Vibrant Isle.
There must be an explanation.
The Kickstarter, it must be. There must be a reason behind this. It's real, right? It is real. I'm not just in a coma, right? So the Kickstarter, there's still time to sign up and check it out. The link is in the show notes if you want to follow through on that. But Craig, where should people follow up with the Vibrant Isle Kickstarter with you and your own things if we want to hear about what you're going to keep doing during this and after this.
Well, it's called Secrets of the Vibrant Isle. It's on Kickstarter for another week by the time this comes out. And you can also find me on Twitter at Nerdburger Craig. The company's Nerdburger Games. So the website is nerdburgergames.com. And you can, there's a couple of books available, other games available there, Capers and Good Strong Hands, which were both games that we did like a offset print run, like a print shop print run. But then also at Drive Through RPG, there's, all the stuff.
All the goods. Check the show notes. All the goods are in the show notes. Finally, before we go, Craig, do you have any parting words for our dear listener who's thinking of chartering a ship and heading to this isle and shipwrecking themselves on the island and getting lost for 4 weeks to find out if they can finally stay forever? What would your advice be to someone who's about to back this game and get a copy of this PDF and play potentially their very first solo game through this? What would you like them to know or to anticipate or be hopeful for when they open up this book or open up this file?
Get some hot chocolate or whatever, tea or whatever is your beverage of choice. A little bit of something that you like to snack on. Sit down in a nice, comfortable place. Play the game. Imagine yourself on this island. Fill in the gaps as you need to. Make it the kind of experience you want it to be. The game book just kind of gives you the bones of everything. You can flesh it out as much as you want, and beware the time spider, because there is a nuisance in the game called the time spider that steals time from you, causes things to take too long, and you don't have a lot of time. You've got 4 weeks.
Oh no. I was about to say, I thought that was just a clever metaphor of beware how much time you're going to spend on the couch playing this, because you're not going to know how much the evening slips by.
There's actually a time spider in the game.
Oh. Special thanks to Craig Campbell for spending time with us today. You can learn more about the secrets of the Vibrant Isle by visiting their Kickstarter page, which you can do by clicking the link in this episode's description. The Terrible Warriors will return on Tuesday with the next episode in our Symbaroum campaign as our trio desperately tries to rally the other heroes of Thistlehold to fight back against the invading beast clan that is pouring out from deep beneath the city. And if you don't want to wait till Tuesday, you can listen to that episode right now by signing up as a supporter on our Patreon page at patreon.com/terriblewarriors. For just the cost of one venti pumpkin spice latte a month, you can get early access to all of our story episodes. And if you'd like to support us further, you can join in on our monthly tip games. This month, we're going to start a new Symbaroum campaign of our own, covering the 6-month gap in our podcast campaign as we continue the mystery of the Copper Crown that caused the Blightborn in the Titans. The Terrible Warriors cannot exist without your support. And for everyone who supports us on Patreon, and for everyone who supports us by sharing, liking, retweeting, and reviewing the show, thank you so much. Podcasts are so hard to share, and the algorithms on Twitter punish you for even mentioning Patreon and throwing up links to the show. So every single time that you tell a friend that this is a podcast worth listening to, you're doing more than I can ever do to grow our little underdog community and help tell everyone that they can play with us. Follow us on Twitter for more details about future episodes, as well as the next game that we will be playing after Symbaroum at Dice Warriors. Production and editing for this episode has been done by me, Justin Eacock. Theme music is by Epic Game Music. And until we meet again, dear listener, rolling dice and sharing stories together, thank you for being a terrible warrior. Be good to each other.